Oh, there we go, okay. Good evening. Welcome to the School District of Waukesha Board Policy Committee meeting for August 16th, 2016. Has the meeting been properly posted, Lynn?
Yes, we have.
Yes, it has. And you have the role here. Amanda is excused for family business this evening. And any opportunity for citizens to speak? Anybody? No? Any correspondence we're supposed to share? No? Wow. All right, we'll move into our policy items. We have minutes from our July meeting, which was held on the 19th. You have those. This is an action item. Anybody moving for approval of the minutes?
I'll do that.
Barbara moves for approval of accepting the minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Greg. Any changes or discussion items on the minutes for the meeting? If not, all in favor of accepting the minutes from July 19th, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, 4-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
We have a couple information items this evening. One is dealing with the revision of policy 8343, which is preparation, there's two numbers involved here, right? 9130 and 8343. All that is involved with this is the replacement of the term Curriculum and Instruction Committee with the term Teaching and Learning Committee. Is there anything more? We've had one reading on this, correct, Lynn? Correct. And the next reading on this would be the presentation at the board for approval on the September meeting.
Yes.
Yeah. Any comments or changes anybody wants to make? Questions? Yes, please. Of
90. The new descriptors for policy, technology, and the work of the committee.
so,
If I may, what that section is addressing is if that committee has final authority over an area. And so for finance and facilities, transportation appeals or rentals, F&F committee has the final say on if that goes through. Human resources has the non-certified, non-management job descriptions, and then student teaching and learning. The other committees don't have final authority on anything. Everything that comes through policy or technology or compensation has to get its final authority, final approval at the board level.
that's the definition there. Okay, we don't really have to vote on this again. We just wanted to review with the board that this, with the committee, with the committee, that this is coming up for final approval in the September meeting. So if there's nothing else that you want to change or adjust on here, we're ready to go with it. Okay. All right. Be prepared for discussion at the September meeting. The next item of the information deals with Neola and where we are with it. And we had a big, long meeting yesterday.
We did. We had about a 10.5-hour session yesterday, covering the teaching and learning and technology policies, generating a draft which will come to the committee. We, as we've gone through this, we've tried to provide some updates, and what I wanted to show the board, or the committee, was really how this process has gone. And last month, we had a couple of policy drafts come to you from our conversation around professional staff. When you look at the policy drafts that are in front of you, it still follows that same format where there is a Neola template. And everybody's been to a work session, so you kind of know how this has gone. And there is then a school district of Waukesha policy, and the guidelines for those policies, and then there's the proposed draft policy, which will come to committee and board for consideration. And as we've gone through this process, we had a little conversation yesterday, but as we've gone through the process, you know, what we've really discovered is the Waukesha district policies have been, you know, the policies that are currently in place are very comprehensive policies, and their associated guidelines are very comprehensive and have given us good direction. What we're doing with Neola is updating some language and reorganizing our policies so that they follow a little bit tighter of a flow from bylaws to administration to students and such. So we have in front of you just a sample of student fees, fines, and charges, which went from Neola template, reviewed Waukesha policy, and then there's a proposed draft. And really, when I say draft, I capitalize every letter and put them all in bold because those drafts are just that. They need to be taken to committee for consideration, revision, and then go through what is our process, you know, committee, board, committee, and then forward for final approval. So I just wanted to show you again another example of how we've done this work. We have business policies in front of you this evening. So I don't know if there are any questions or comments or.
Under guidelines for fees, number 3, I believe principals are authorized to withhold diplomas. That's not going to carry over to the new one, because we've discussed that, and we definitely agreed that could not happen.
Correct. And what you have is this packet was put together, and these policies were put together with what is currently in place. The conversation last week at the board meeting
Right.
Is to address a policy update, a guideline update.
There's an important point that Barbara, you're making that we should make sure everybody understands, is the work we're doing with Neola is not changing any policies.
Not
It's really reviewing them, coming up with different wording, filling in voids, reducing redundancy and some of that stuff. So any work that we've met in those various work sessions is not changing a policy. That will have to ultimately be done at a board level. So, and this is just a timing thing here. This one was corrected or not corrected, revised at a board meeting already, and it's just that the two didn't come together yet. That will be fine.
Correct. And one of the disclaimers that I've made at all of our work sessions is that what is talked and discussed today at the work session does not come into effect until it is approved by the board. And we've talked about kind of a target January, February, completion time. However, that's flexible. But it's important for me to stress with our staff in the district that they don't leave a work session, go back to their department and say, hey, we're shifting gears on this, because ultimately that's board approval, and that we need to wait for that to go through, so.
Yes.
One more question, Joe. In addressing collection of fees, there's many strategies that are used by the schools and by the district. Do you have any idea approximately annually how many fees are waived?
The waiver of fees, the only thing that I would be confident of would be, reporting would be that any student who qualifies for homeless would have
Okay.
a fee waived.
Okay.
And that's the only
That's the
really
only.
definitive,
Okay.
if you qualify for homeless status, you qualify for a fee waiver. Everybody else, we'd have to go back and really dig into that. So it would be difficult for us to take a look at who has had fees waived.
But sometimes, unemployment occurs in the family, et cetera, and, then it would be difficult to.
Our fee structure does default to what is the free and reduced, where people are at with lunch. We do also have some families that have had to declare that they're indigent and unable to pay, and we require some supporting documentation in order
Okay,
to
good.
verify that.
Thank you.
The questions on where we are with Neola, and, by the way, are we finished with the work sessions? You had said
Pardon?
once you might have to go one more time yet.
We do. We have a work session scheduled for September 1st, 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and we'll be sending out
First
an
day of
invitation.
school?
The first day of school.
You're risking it.
Yes. However, what we want to be able to do is at the September, no teachers, no principals, we're not pulling anybody out of school. The things that are left over are things that are more at the district level, and district administration, along with the board committee members, can weigh in on what's being talked about. A few sessions back, we were talking about the bylaws and the administration, and we had hoped to get to public relations on that. And we still have to address the public relations series. But if I were to apply a percentage, I think we're probably about 87, 88% through the documents. We have a very small 10, 12, 13% left to go through.
Said the first, did you have a time on that?
9 a.m. until 3 p.m. is what is scheduled. And an invite will come from Lynn to
Yeah.
committee members once the internet is up and running.
Good. Do you have some? Oh,
I do.
Barb?
Did Richard start with the very first page of the policy book and go, number by number, category by category, or did he pick policies from different parts of the policy book?
He went through our policy book,
Yeah.
so the Waukesha policy book. He went through all of the policies online. First off, he knows the Neola stuff inside and out. I mean,
Sure.
he knows their numbering
Sure
and
he does.
everything. And so, for instance, if we had student fees and guideline for fees, he knows the corresponding Neola number. And so what he did during our work sessions, and we saw it yesterday, is he took the Waukesha language, copied and pasted it into the Neola template. And as we went through what was there, what Neola had recommended, we took Waukesha language and put it in where appropriate. When we didn't have the language that we needed, we built in the Neola language. Or if we had a conversation around, is this policy or is this guidelines? Or do our guidelines belong in policy? We made sure that the drafts were set up based off of what the work group's recommendation to committee is going to be.
So he went through every page.
He knows our policies. Probably is better than most.
Yeah, that's quite a task.
And
Thank
it
you.
does benefit us to have a person who is a retired superintendent who's gone through this many
Right.
times, assisting us in the
Right,
process.
he's very knowledgeable.
He's been working across the state with this, so he has
He's done this with about 40 school districts.
Oh, my.
so he brings ideas that maybe we've never thought about.
That's true. Oh, absolutely.
And the reconfiguration of the way I don't know if you noticed this, but in our work sessions, we're not doing it in any kind of an order like that. We're doing it in clusters. Student, administrative clusters, student clusters, curriculum, that kind of stuff,
Yep.
which makes more sense. Joe?
Yeah, before we started this process, I wasn't really sure what this was going to look and feel like. And actually, I had a concern that, we're just going to be changing everything and everything's just going to completely not feel like our district, and we'd have a bunch of big holes, and we'd be, eventually approving something that was very different. And I've really appreciated the process of taking the templates, which on the other concern is what's a template? Ooh, how valuable is that? Well, actually, the templates have some really good information in from a statute perspective and making sure that we follow all the statutes. So that's a really good thing. We found out that for the most part, at least the sessions I've been in, we've been following the statutes pretty darn well. So that was a good thing. There are some points though that come up from time to time that really required some in-depth conversation as to how we feel on certain things and how do you merge these together and how do you really take the essence of what we're doing and what we're all about and what our policy is and to really make sure it's our policy. So I've been really impressed with the process. The amount of time that we're taking, I think, is worth it. I think it's maybe taking a little longer than what I thought to talk on some of these things, but, it's important. And, we've said, it's the first time we've really audited literally everything from front to end. And usually we take 1 or 2 series in a year, and we just kind of rotate. So we're taking them all at once and really focusing on it. So I've been really pleased with the process. We still have a ways to go to finalize everything, but it's been good. I feel really comfortable with Neola and their level of expertise. That's been good.
And if I could just add one thing, I know that, as we go through this, there's about 400 policies that we will have reviewed through our committee work. And the discussion around those policies has ranged anywhere from a couple of minutes around something that is, this is the absolute law, there's no, getting away from that, to our conversation yesterday around our field trips, which was about 2 hours and 15
Yes.
minutes. So if there's any question about, is this customized to how the Waukesha schools operate, we have given ample conversation to things that have evolved to how we operate in Waukesha, such as, field trips and other policies that have had hour-long conversations. There have been other ones that you can't get away from what the federal government wants you to do, what is, mandated by perhaps the Office of Civil Rights, and you have to adopt that for what it is, so.
Yeah, and just to continue on along that line, Joe, it was really funny. There was one we found yesterday. I can't remember what it pertained to, but we adopted it back in like the late 70s, early 80s, and we really hadn't done anything with it except review it periodically, but never really changed it for like 20 years. And it's like, do we even need this? I mean, there was some language, some policies that we really just didn't even need. We couldn't even figure out what it applied to, right? It was like, how does this work? Do we even do this any longer? So there's even, we're weeding out things that really just don't matter anymore.
And we've allowed ourselves to be a little bit general in some areas, like the conversation yesterday around personal computing devices, because our old policy talked about pagers. And at the time that a pager was written in, it was absolutely appropriate because principals were pulling their hair out over kids walking around with pagers. Now, I don't know if anybody has a pager anymore, but everybody is walking around with a personal computer on their phone. And so we wanted to make sure that we evolved to where we were at as a system.
No, I think this is Greg, you have something?
First of all, I wanted to commend you, Joe, for just
Yeah.
all this process. Your leadership in this area.
Microphone.
Our final work session will be on the 1st, and then it will take Richard several weeks to take what we discussed and then give us what is going to be a preliminary draft of what's going to come to committee. And then we had some conversation yesterday as a committee about possibly doing a work session to talk about it, or to look at it from the scope of what is, what's the committee process. So there may be a work session coming up around the policies. There might also be, for instance, in September, we might be looking at the bylaws and the administration series as a committee. Which will then be passed along to the board so that the full board can take a look at it. In October, then we would come back to the bylaws and the administration, and then we would add the professional staff and the support staff policies for a first read, and then that would, and so getting back down to what has been our practice, our process for policy adoption. Looking at 2 series of policies, and I promise you won't get that the Friday before the meeting. We'll give you that several weeks out, so that you have an opportunity to review it and give it consideration, and then we would come together and have conversation here. I think if I was betting, I think that the bet would be that the policy committee meetings would probably be longer as we're going through what are those drafts, and if there's suggested changes from the board, or from the committee, then make sure that we entertain those. I think that one of the valuable pieces of this is that we've had representatives from the committee at our work sessions, and so that we've had a board's perspective, a board member's perspective, an individual member's perspective on what the policy draft is going to look like. So everybody's going to have had an opportunity to put their eyes on it a little bit.
Right.
So the way I understand what you're just saying is the actual approval, we won't necessarily approve the whole 10 series in one meeting. We can do this in a phasing?
We can do the review of the series in a phasing, but when it's time to approve the book, that's
Okay,
when
but
we say.
okay, we'll review it and then hold it aside until
Till
that final cut.
Correct. And then the book should be approved in one
One setting.
meeting, because we don't want to have, our current numbering might have something in our 6,000 series that is in
Right.
the Neola 5,000, and we don't want any of that overlap. So it would be a full book approval at one board meeting.
Good, yeah, makes sense. And thinking back to some of the comments here before, you used the term auditing. If we hadn't approached it with the way we're doing it through Neola, we would continue going on and going on and going on and never really getting a complete review and overhaul and audit and overhaul of the package, which is, I think is going to be a wonderful final product and very complete. We have learned, for the most part, that we are following all the rules. Here and there, we're over-following rules. Or following rules that don't have to be followed, or I don't know how to say that, but you know what I mean. Maybe we're too conservative on some of them. In other cases, we did have some things that had to be updated.
Correct.
And
But it feels good that an outside agency is coming in and telling us that.
bingo.
Experts.
Us.
And, a couple things about it, we are now in a position where we are comparing what we have off of something that is legally compliant. And I think
Yes.
that that's the benefit. When you do an
Yes.
internal review, oftentimes you're reviewing how you're operating, but you don't have that framework to compare to. And sometimes that has happened. And Joe, we saw one of those policies that had been reviewed but not necessarily updated yesterday, and the one that you just talked about. I think the other thing is that while there's a lot of work on the front end and administrative work out of the committee and going to be work out of the full board, the real benefit comes after that. And after that, we get the twice-a-year updates from Neola, which will allow us to stay compliant across all 10 series of policies. They will give us updates if there's a change at the state legislature, at the federal level, because sometimes those come quickly. We will get those updates so that we can make sure that our policies contain that. And then on the user end, for our families and for our community, the Neola outline from the 0 to the 9,000 series, plus how the policy links to the guidelines, which could link to, forms and have, hyperlinked in the handbook. The usability of the system is going to be a lot more user-friendly for our community. And when we talk about it, renumbering policies, administrators and perhaps board members are going to be, well, that used to be the 6,000s, but now it's the 5,000s. We would have to get used to that. For our families who want to look at something for students, they're going to go to the website, they're going to see students, they're going to be able to click in there, find the appropriate policy, and it's going to be easier for us as administrators to communicate with our community around how we have to operate as a system.
Yeah, the first meeting I was at, I think Richard mentioned that the search for a parent to search for something, they'll be much more liberal in what words they put up there and then to help them find it.
Correct.
Barb?
You. But we really never will be finished with the policy book because, as you pointed out, there's changes from the state, from the federal government, and so we'll have a policy committee and we'll be reviewing what needs to be reviewed and change as needed.
Document.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, when we say being finished with the book, we're finished with draft one.
That's right.
Version
That's right.
1.0, knowing that every year there's going to be a couple updates to that.
That's right.
Joe?
Hey, just to give the audience perhaps a little bit of an appreciation for the maintenance portion that Neola will provide for us with updates to state and federal law. Right now, we get newsletters and we get other documents saying these laws have changed and you should consider changing your policy and you might want to do this and you may want to go to this district and take a peek at what they've done. And so we'd have to essentially do all that research ourselves. It would fall upon administration. And, depending upon what the time of year is, how busy you are, those things might get updated quickly, they might get pushed aside. it was just a really manually labor-intensive process. Now we're paying a company, actually, I think a relatively small stipend for what they're doing compared to the hours and hours and hours that you guys, used to put in. And having it actually be compared, having the information not only be already prepared by attorneys, following the statutes, but now you know consistently too what other districts are doing. And so it's actually quite, I think, very efficient. I think we're going to find, Joe and Lynn, you're going to have just so much time on your hands now, right?
Ready for the next project.
I don't think so.
But it was very labor intensive and very manual process. And then when it became complex, we'd have to hand it off to one of our attorneys and say, hey,
Yeah.
is this something we should be doing, not doing? And I think those costs will far exceed, chipping, one here, one there, and you keep adding those up during the year. I think those are going to add up to be more than just what our maintenance fee is, so.
Correct. After the initial work is done, the annual maintenance fee would be far less than is what it could be spent on what an attorney would cost to go through and draft, review, revise a policy for us.
Good. September 1st is the next one.
September 1st is the next one, and then at that point, I double-checked with Richard that, 6 hours will be more than ample to get through what we have left. Again, we will invite the committee to the work session. If it's, you maybe could attend, please let us know, and then we'll make sure that if we need to post the work session, we will post the work session, so.
Good. Okay, other business. Anybody have any suggestions for something we have to cover in a future meeting that we haven't considered? Question for Lynn. Have we identified the dates of all of our future policy meetings for this school year?
Yes,
We have that, can you like email us?
absolutely. Yes.
So I can put it in here?
Third Tuesday of the month,
Oh, it's always gonna be?
6 PM, but I will share it out with everybody.
Okay,
Yes,
that would be nice.
Looks like that.
Is it on there?
lower left
I'll be
corner.
darned. All I gotta do is find that sheet of paper.
I'll send it out to
My
everybody.
grandkids are shredding it tonight. Found out about the shredder. Okay, that would bring us to the end of the meeting then. Thank you. We stand adjourned.
You know what, I haven't. Bill, I have an extra